right.
And there we go.
Thanks, Doug. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for your patience. As you've already noted, we're running this event as a meeting, so welcome in, and please do feel free to turn on your cameras if you like to say hello or stay behind the scenes as you choose. So welcome to the Office of Rules and Norms office hours, this time focused on the series of artistic interventions the Shock Value Fellowship launched in response to the housing crisis. We have 4 panelists joining us today, and I'll pass it over to organizers shortly. But first, we at Forest Space recognize the Kanyankahaga Nation as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather. Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, where Forest Space is located on unceded Indigenous land, has long been a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous settlers, immigrants, and refugees, and we want to express our respect for the long-standing Indigenous presence in Montreal and our solidarity with decolonizing work. For those of you joining us for the first time at Forest Space, welcome. We collaborate with our community to make Concordia research initiatives and course activities publicly accessible through interactive experiences such as today's. So I'll just note that we are recording and live streaming the session. I'll put those links in the chat in a minute. And on that note, I think I'll pass it over to you, Marie-Sophie. Welcome, good afternoon.
Hi, thank you, Anna. So welcome everyone to this, I don't know which edition, but one of the many editions of the office hours, which is relaxed, informal conversation that we hold through, that's initiative basically of the Office of Rules and Norms, which is an arts-based studio, interdisciplinary art-based studio headquartered at the Faculty of Fine Arts here at Concordia, where we explore rules, norms, the rule of law through art, trying to make all of these very complex and I have a hard time saying the word convoluted norms through the lens of art. So my name is Marie-Sophie Banville, and I lead the anti-speculation desk at the Office of Rules and Norms. And one of our amazing initiatives this year is the Shock Value Fellowship. So basically, this fellowship is formed by 4 students / artists who have been engaging with the housing crisis, but through a very specific theme, which is the one of value. How do we come to value land? How do we come to value housing? And through the kind of traditional understanding we have of value, what is left out? And how can we expand our understanding of value and the way it produces the territory on which we live? So what we want to do today is basically the Shock Value Fellowship. They came up with 4 artistic interventions that they wanted to produce in the city of Montreal. And what we realized one of them, which is concrete capital. So we did one, and then there's 3 more to go. So what we want to do today basically is just, let the fellow discuss a bit, discuss their thinking, discuss how the first intervention went, which is concrete capital, and then share with you what they're planning for their next steps and get your feedback on, your thoughts, your comments on what they're planning on doing. This is a really relaxed, non-formal discussion we want to have. So really, please feel free to join. We're super happy that you're here. So I think Doug has kindly offered to put the bios of each of the fellow into the chat. So you can learn a bit more about them here. And after this, I would just let you guys introduce the work that we've been doing so far. So I think, Gabe, you're gonna.
Yes. Thank you, Marie-Sophie, for introducing the concepts. I'll go ahead and share screen. How's that? Does everyone, yes, got a thumb up. So my name's Gabriel Townsend, and I am one of the 4 Shock Value Fellows. We're here today, very excited to present our work to you and get some feedback. So as Marie-Sophie said, the fellowship is an artistic project uniting our four minds around the concept of value, especially, but not exclusively, land value. We're very much looking at the concept of value, how it manifests in the city. And so when we talk about value in the city and land value, we very quickly start talking about real estate. Many of our we have four projects. So when we actually started working on this when we were the students of a class given by the Office of Rules and Norms in winter 2020, class given by Marie-Sophie. The final project of the class was to produce an artistic a proposal for an art project. The four of us did that, and then the pandemic happened, and we weren't able to realize our artistic projects that we had proposed that were all around land value and real estate value and the financialization of housing and themes like that. So Marie-Sophie and the Office of Rules and Norms approached us in December of 2020, offering to support us to realize the projects finally. So what we did was we decided to go ahead with the four original proposals that we had prepared right before the pandemic and realize them in 2021. So the first one was realized very recently in May. That was Thomas's project. And so I think I will pass it on to Thomas unless anyone else from the fellowship wants to say a word of introduction.
Thanks, Gabe. Yeah, that sums it up pretty well. Before we go right into concrete capital, some of the themes that we were exploring, like Gabe said, was the idea of value creation. So how is value materialized throughout the city, whether that is under the form of financial value or other forms of value. We looked at the concept of land monopoly, and so who owns land, who controls land, and who controls how land is developed. And this wonderful concept of the financialization of land, which I'll go a bit more in depth later on. Our process was geared around research, these four public interventions, methods of strategic design, all with a little hint of subversion. And so we're asking many questions, as we will mention throughout this presentation, and we hope to find some answers to these questions at the end of our process and also at the end of today through our discussion with you. All right, so Concrete Capital is both a research essay and a research piece, as well as a public art intervention that took place 2 weeks ago and then a second time last week. The research for this project has been ongoing for the last year and was concerned with trying to understand the financial mechanisms of real estate specifically in Montreal, in order to piece together the current housing crisis with the unprecedented rates of residential construction that are currently happening at the same time, especially in these types of high-end condominium projects. So the project took Maestria Condominiums, which is a two-tower project. It's going to be over 60 stories at Place des Arts in downtown Montreal. Took this project as a case study that exemplified the financialization of housing. And so the financialization of housing being a growing attitude towards residential development, in which real estate and land are conceived and utilized more as financial instruments according to the laws of finance to generate capital returns rather than places to house people. In other words, a financialized housing system can continue to churn out houses and apartments and housing units without in as much providing more housing to a population in growing need. And of course, these developments don't occur within a vacuum and have immediate effects on increasing surrounding value of land and setting new standards for home prices and rents. So this reflection led me to bring forward the possibility that when real estate is managed as a financial instrument, as exemplified by Maestria, but also many other projects currently being built downtown, such as 1 Square Phillips, Victoria sur le Parc, Solstice Montréal, Le 1500, when they're managed as financial instruments, these projects, these new developments become a force that exacerbates the housing crisis and in turn social inequality, rather than proposing a solution to it, which is vouched for this position by many economists, like the point of view that according to supply-demand logic, the more you build, the more you'll solve the housing crisis, which is obviously not that straightforward. So if Gabe, you want to go to the next slide, we have a website which you're all welcome to check out, and the research piece is up on that website. There's the link up here, and we can put the link in the chat as well. And so, like Gabe said, this project took the form of an art piece, which was a public projection. We can go to the next slide. On the sales office of Maestria. So you'll see the number here, 700 million, which is the current market value of the site. And of course, that number is not insignificant and was also is also representative of the long process of speculation that went on for that piece of land. And as we go to the next photos, you'll see a little clearly at the bottom left, this number 700,000 uses the zeros, 700 million, sorry, uses the zeros as these kind of little portals through which are shown details of images of the site throughout the last approximately 15 years. So, also being the period during which the land value was increasing exponentially. And so as the number, as 700 million was being projected, these little images would appear slowly and disappear sort of as flashes or memories of the site throughout time up until this point. If we go to the next slide, the projection was also interspersed with different facts and different numbers that helped contextualize a bit Maestria. And so, for example, at the top left, we see, for instance, the fact that currently there are 24,000 individuals and families waiting for social housing. And then on the other image, we see that the different prices for condos, for housing units at Maestria, which are quite absurd. And we thought it would help to show a bit, to put you guys in space and see it how it went on a bit more clearly with a video at the next slide. It's a short video, and I don't know, Gabe, if you need to connect your audio as well, but I don't know if that's a possibility.
Let's just see what happens.
All right.
Are you hearing audio? Is that a no? Okay, let me
No.
1 second to see if I can connect audio.
If not, the audio is just ambient noise of the street, which we can maybe do without.
True. All right. Yeah, I'm not sure how to do it, so let's just hit play. so we were projecting from across the street, and we had various people come and you know, ask us questions about what was going on, and a lot of people were the passersby would kind of look up and be a little confused. Some of them would come and ask us about it, but this was one of the things that we this was one of the observations we had, was that actually when we had a larger group of people, which was not this night where the footage is, when we had our larger group of people on our side of the street, like friends and family that we had invited to come to be there, and witness the launch of this projection, more passersby would stop and look at the projection, because it seemed that they were attracted by this group of onlookers, versus the night when the night when this footage was taken, which where there were the passersby were not as engaged with the projection.
Yeah, so this is a good point to bring up. You know, as we have upcoming 2 other interventions in the near future, and we're going to be reflecting on, you know, how do you engage more with people? How do you get people to stop and ask questions? And for instance, the projection referred people to the website to, you know, if they were curious about learning more and reading the piece. But yeah, for the next interventions, we'd like for there to be more interaction with passersby.
Might I jump in on this?
Of course.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Christine. I'm working with the Shock Value Fellowship, and so being a part of the projections, another thing that we were thinking about was that this particular site, there happens to be a lot of stimulation in the environment, and that seeing a projection on a wall at Place des Arts is perhaps not that peculiar. You know, it could be that people passing by are just kind of looking up and being like, yep, that's normal. You know, it might just be that our setup was a little bit, you know, a bit different maybe than your everyday projections, but this is definitely something to consider when doing these kinds of interventions and wanting to do engagement, is to sort of think about how people are approaching something in public space. What are people maybe used to seeing, which then makes them not see it, versus how can something kind of stand out and get their attention in a world where our attention's being pulled in many directions, especially in the city. So yeah, I think that those 2 combinations, you know, thinking about, is there a crowd? Because then there becomes this like crowd mentality. You know, if you see 20 people looking at something, you might sort of almost subconsciously want to just look and see what they're looking at. And yeah, so things to reflect on, like Thomas was mentioning, moving forward into the other interventions.
Thomas, is that
Yeah, this wraps it up for me.
okay? So that is our first success of many. I'm gonna try to go forward here. So what comes next? The next projects that we're going to realize were my own and Christine's from the class. So we're actually doing them together because we find that they're touching on similar processes and kind of similar touching on similar critiques also of how land value is construed. So my piece is called Highest and Best Use, but we call it the pavilion a lot, because the pavilion is this wooden structure that you see here on the right. The idea is that it's this very basic structure that travels around the city and gets put up on various private properties. The piece questions this notion, this law of highest and best use, the law of real estate, where if you buy a piece of land, you must make the highest and best use of that land in order to extract really the full value that is embodied in the land. So the question here is, what does it mean for a use to be highest and best? And also, who decides what's highest and best? And how or why, by what mechanisms do we recognize highest and best use and accept it? So this dinky little wooden shack, which is barely even a shack, goes around the city, plops itself down on private properties, sometimes very high valued private properties, and actually it proposes to generate value on these properties as a kind of tongue-in-cheek way of saying that this pavilion can elevate the current use of the property to its highest and best, which is not currently being attained. So, Christine, do you want to do a quick intro of states and sounds and emotions, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other photo you see in the slide is a bit of a little data visualization, which is sort of the end result of this process that invites people to think about and record the sounds that they're experiencing in, say, a residence, and then track that and think about and feel what kind of emotions come up with that. So I'm not sure at what point we want to move on to next slides, because there are some other points that
Sure, I'll go forward.
yeah. Okay, cool.
So this is kind of what I said earlier. This is a picture of Mille de la Gauchetière, which is one of the highest valued properties in Montreal, and it's the second tallest building in Montreal. So the idea is, why not? Who says that Mille de la Gauchetière has reached its highest and best use? I mean, it's just the landlord and the city and the system that said so. What if the pavilion came along and offered some ambiance, some fun activity, and raise the value a little bit? Who decides what's highest and best? Is the market the best or only judge of value? Who is the market? Who is judging value? What are the measures of value? Do alternative kinds of investment create value in a real estate economy?
Yeah, and those are such great questions, and a lot of what I was trying to explore by diving into this this form that I believe is a landlord would fill out to give a statement of what's kind of going on their property. So, this is just the photograph in the background is me diving into the form, trying to understand what it does, sort of using highlighters and color coding to kind of just pick it apart, which is actually what inspired the front cover image that you saw earlier in the slides. It ended up, I played around and turned it into this collage of the cityscape, which was just an interesting process for me to work through this form in this way.
And if I may
Yeah.
comment, Christine, the form is used by the City of Montreal's tax roll evaluation service to assess the value of buildings.
Yeah, exactly. So it's yeah, it's a way to calculate that value, to turn these sort of physical attributes into a number, into that money. So yeah, kind of like what Gabe was pointing out, like who's deciding what these variables are, like in this form, like someone had to make this form, and it's got very specific variables. And I just kind of started to think to myself, I mean, especially inspired a bit by the pandemic and when things sort of started to lock down and things became really quiet outside. And I just started to realize, like, what if I were to evaluate the sounds of my residence and try to quantify that in some way of like it creating value? And yeah, so I just kind of started thinking about this, you know, how does the sound of a city affect, you know, affect the quality of living in a city? And then if assessing land value was a democratic process, kind of like what Gabe is also proposing to do, I actually will just throw it out there to all of you. What would you consider valuable about land? And we'll just move forward in the slides.
Yes.
So this is the first page of the form. I think this was actually my own test, kind of working through it, trying it out. And yeah, as mentioned, it's just inspired by the statement of income and expenses of the movable. So I just took the exact format and just played around with it in Illustrator, and but also sort of thought about, instead of calculating or turning it into a number, I thought, how could we maybe represent this in something visual, like as a way of like data visualization? And then where it gets interesting in terms of like asking people to fill this out and having the pavilion pop up somewhere is, we thought to bring these projects together and actually have a printed version of this form, maybe blown up kind of big, then put against one of the walls inside the pavilion. We'll have them, the idea is to laminate them, and then, you know, then individuals can fill out a form collectively based on a specific site that the pavilion is at. And then perhaps maybe I'll do some kind of visualization based on that data. But then I thought too, it would be great to actually get these forms out into the hands of people, because I would just love to see what kind of things people track. So I thought that I could also, you know, pre-stamp some envelopes, print out a few of the forms, have them all ready to go, and hand them out to people on site, anyone who's interested. And also, Douglas has a link to share of the form if you're interested in filling it out. There is a link to the Google Drive incoming. Thank you, Douglas. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say about this for now.
Cool. So to break it down, really the process of how we're going to go about this is, we're going to start with, it starts with the actual site visit, being on site and generating value on site. So the pavilion comes in, it gets put up. Christine and I are in the process of building the pavilion. It's going to be a dismantleable structure, so we should be able to throw it up within an hour. We put up the pavilion on the site. We get the form set up and out. And as people come and pass by, pass through, interact with the pavilion, interact with the form, this is all part of our data collection process. So actually, so the form, Christine's form statement of sounds and emotions itself is a data collection tool that's collecting data about the sonic and emotional value of the site. And the pavilion actually has a guest book as well. And that guest book serves to collect data on people's experiences of the pavilion. Oh, this is so great, you're all geniuses, or oh, this was so awful and awkward. I really don't like the fact that you came here and did this today. So this is all part of the data collection process that allows for step 2, which is the data analysis, or if you will, manipulation, which by which Christine's statement of sounds and emotions gets turned into this map kind of that represents the value assessment of the site. It's actually the colorful visual that we saw a few slides ago, and the data from the pavilion's guest book gets entered into an Excel sheet that does a bunch of arbitrary processing and spits out a monetary value for the experiences that were acquired or that were generated on the site that day. And so step 3 is to go and notify the owner of the building, as well as the city's tax roll services, that the land has changed value. So, you know, if Milderagos itself is worth $400 million, we might see an uptick in, like, I don't know, $60, $70 in the value. But it's very important that the city be notified, and the owner, because if they're not going and extracting this value from the land, then they're not doing good real estate. So this is all happening in the beginning of July is our date, our period. So I'll pass it to Maddie to explain Value Collective to us.
Hi. Yes, Value Collective. So a little bit different from the other projects. It's not exactly an intervention in the same way. I have nothing imminently planned, but it's been a bit more about fleshing out the concept and understanding, breaking down what it actually takes to make something like this happen, and sort of networking, trying to talk with people who have experience with this kind of thing, and just sort of generally seeing how far I can get with it. So just to summarize, Value Collective offers rent-free residencies and resources to create non-financial value. You can keep it on that slide. It proposes to establish a living lab for alternative economic practices, which would also incorporate other alter economy pilot projects, such as time banking, complementary currency, etc. The goal is to realize efforts that are valuable but not profitable, which contribute to social or ecological well-being, and which cannot or should not be realized through the market. So put another way, it's kind of about fostering new or alternative forms of economic practice, which can meet needs unmet by existing economic conditions. So sort of like prototyping new forms of work suited to the 21st century. I also see it as a way of building resilience by adding diversity to the economy and strengthening social networks. It's also about reconceptualizing value and economy beyond the monetary. I think we can challenge the financialization of society through the development of new value frameworks, and ideally bring more relational conceptions of work life and value to the fore. So that's a quick summary. There's a lot more I could say. I've been playing with a lot of different theories, but I'm just going to briefly go over the work that I've done in the last couple months. So yeah, you can go on to the next slide. So I've entered 2 design competitions to help me further develop this concept, just giving myself a framework to work within. The first one was a UX challenge. This is called Design for Change. It was a hackathon, so it was just a couple of weeks. So it was pretty intense. And for that, I used UX methodology. So that included interviewing some of my friends who were sort of creative, politically active, just to better understand the types of work that they were doing pro bono, the values and motivations underpinning those efforts, and the conditions that made their work more or less doable. From this, I created 5 personas. That's what you see in the picture. It says Julia. These are kind of like archetypes of people who I think would benefit from this initiative, and just to sort of give a face to them, and just to break down a bit more like the kinds of things that they do, their values, what they're helped by, what's challenging to them. I also boiled down my ideas into 5, I've been calling them pillars, just to give structure to Value Collective's mission. So that's the 5 colored stripes that you see. Yeah, you can go on to the next slide. So the other competition that I've been engaging with is called C40. There's 2 categories to this competition, student and professional. So together with 3 teammates, Thomas and Gabe from Shock Value, with us today, as well as another design student, Maya Jane, we developed an entry to the student category of C40, which has been for the Faubourgs district. This is like where Radio Canada is, and the Molson Brewery. So as a whole neighborhood, and Value Collective was just a component in our proposal. But this was an interesting exercise just to kind of understand how something like this could work in concert with like a certain sort of policy environment and with certain goals and within a specific architecture as well. And so for that, I wrote a short story just to get away from all of the dry theory and kind of facilitate a more emotional, humanistic engagement with the concept. That's what you see on the left. And then at the same time, through kind of a strange series of events, I ended up speaking with the leader of one of the proposals for the professional category, who, if her proposal wins, will be developing 4000 St. Patrick. That's the building that you see in the top right corner. If you've been to this event before, you might recognize it because this is the warehouse that originally modeled for Value Collective in the initial paper that I wrote proposing this concept, just kind of a coincidence. But that was interesting to come back to that. And so this conversation with this developer kind of brought me out of the more like visioning, theorizing phase that I've been in for the last couple months, and a bit more into like a logistical mind frame, because our conversation mostly revolved around her previous experiences with non-financial value exchange in real estate development, and just some of the obstacles that she's encountered, which is, you know, the type of thing that you can only really understand if you've tried it, and a lot of unknowns that come up. So going forward, yeah, I want to just continue unpacking the logistical challenges, exploring possible pathways, and just, yeah, generally seeing how far I can get in the timeframe before the end of July. And I'm also interested, maybe this is a bit more like on the intervention level, I'm interested in maybe experimenting with some of the components of the project because it's quite broad, just on a smaller scale, as I think this would allow for a bit more of like an iterative, practice-led approach to developing it. That's it.
Thank you. So, and just before I wrap up, Gabe and Christine, do you have already like dates set up for the pavilion and like locations and moments that we can share with everyone?
Unfortunately, not yet. We're trying to confirm date and location with a property owner.
Okay, great.
Right
So
now.
you can follow like Office of Rules and Norms on Facebook, for example, and our website orn.studio if you want to interact with the pavilion and the fill out the statement and participate in this grand popular collective process of value creation. So, well, thank you. Thank you to the four of you for your presentation. I think, concrete capital setting the stage for making visible how value creation works, and then moving forward with two interventions that kind of ask the question, well, what do you consider valuable, and act basically as this invitation to reclaim the process of value assessment and value creation, and then leading forward to Maddie's proposal, which not only kind of reclaim the process of value creation, but also pushes the envelope a bit further and ask, how can we redefine the rules about the way value circulates and how we get to capture and transfer it. So I'll just open the floor to, I know I have like ideas and new questions that pop up, but first I want to leave the floor open to the rest of the people present here. If you have like questions, comments, ideas, some of the questions were, fellows asked some questions as well. So I'm just gonna shut up for a little while, see if someone wants to go first. You can also put it in the chat. Hi.
Hello.
Hello, Melania.
So, so I have a question. Thanks for your guys' presentation. So my big question is, I think all of you have sort of maybe different thinking into a sort of shared problematic. But what I didn't maybe understand fully is, do you have some kind of strategic goal? Are you trying to achieve like a shift in culture? Are you trying to get people to like make a political party and get this done? Like, what do you have a kind of more specific kind of strategy for making some of your decisions, maybe, is my question? Or what are you basing your decisions to do this rather than that on?
A good question. I might venture to answer it. I think the way that we're tackling this, the housing crisis, the financialization of land, these different themes, we're approaching them, I think, through the lens, the course Access in the City that we all took together, I think really inspired this type of thinking, which I believe is a rare way of approaching the theme of and the subject of real estate and housing, seeing it in more of a through a systemic lens and trying to understand broadly, what are, yes, also like the financial mechanisms that have brought us to the current situation, to where we are now, but also culturally and societally, what are the frameworks that allow for the exponential growth of the cost of living, essentially, and of housing. And maybe we didn't make it clear enough, but for instance, critical concrete leads into the two following projects in a way. Critical concrete sets the stage and tries to understand. Capital concrete. Apologies. Sets the stage for what is present, what is ongoing, and the public intervention was trying to get people, to draw people in to the research, and to get people to generate their own reflections and to ask these types of systemic questions that need to be asked, rather than just trying to find a scapegoat or trying to pinpoint like the one thing that will solve the housing crisis. And then Gabe and Christine's projects are sort of these exchanges with the public, and working with people in this fun way, this playful way to reflect on, okay, how can we think otherwise, and how can we pinpoint and identify the different forms of value that we want to increase and give more value to, and then Maddie's is like the flip side is, we set this, we've understood what the problem is, and now we're trying to design this sort of alternative way of value creation and understanding value and what is valuable to us in our day-to-day life outside of a financial system. So there's this process from one project to the next, and then as a goal, I think the goal is just to try and see how we can make people think this way, in this larger, broader context, maybe more qualitative way as well, more broadly, and through events like the office hours or through these public interventions, trying to draw people in.
Yeah,
and if since I kind of set the stage for this way of thinking, I have to take a kind of share of public responsibility for this, I guess. But I think, Melania, that the question that you ask is really one that I keep on asking myself, like pretty much every day. I've been involved in finding solutions to quote unquote fix the housing crisis, or work on non-speculative housing models for like almost a decade now. And over the past couple of years, I've embraced more of a kind of systemic approach to the housing crisis. And the class was really about, okay, we need to understand the deeper systems that produced unaffordable cities. Because if we keep on asking for more social housing or more co-ops, and we should definitely do that. But the thing is, they are so difficult to produce. And there's a reason why not enough social housing is being built, is because of those underlying systems. So I know that there's this tension where when you want to kind of not necessarily slow down, but take a step back and have those kind of systemic reflection about the housing crisis, you kind of look like you're doing philosophy while some people are, not able to get a home. But at the same time, I feel like the more people understand those underlying system, which is exactly like doing interventions like this one, which make them kind of, it creates a door through which you can enter this reflection. If you're not an economist, you've never really thought about the notion of value, and then suddenly you have like the pavilion, you have projections. I'm like, I think these things should go together. So yeah, it's a kind of tension. I don't see it as like either or. I think we need both to work together, and like being constantly, I don't know, in dialogue and maybe frustrated with one another for like the discussion to continue to be productive.
No, I think that was a good answer. I was just I was curious as the kind of logic of the underlying approach. Thank you.
I'm curious about like how you feel about like when you started engaging in this subject, and like where that's brought you, and how your different projects have influenced, like how you've influenced each other through this process.
How have we influenced each other? That's a good question.
Well, it's been great working as a team.
Yeah, I think we've been
first of
really
all.
supportive of each other just to kind of help like move things along. I'd say like our process was a lot of like initial just meetings and conversations, and then once we sort of figure out a common thread and that we could take this linear approach, that being able to do intervention work with other people out in the street is also super beneficial. Doing intervention work alone on the street is really challenging. So, just having that team dynamic to actually go out and do these actions or just like talk about these ideas together has been extremely helpful.
Yeah, and I'd also say that I think the shock value collective project is greater than the sum of its parts. Like each of our projects responds to something that the others don't, and kind of like I think that I've been able to make better sense of each of our projects in relation to the others. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And also just technically speaking, and we're not operating, we're not working. Yes, each project is individual in a sense, but also really isn't at this point. Like everyone worked on Capital Concrete as well. Sorry, Concrete Capital. I always get them mixed up. Christine took charge of the whole technical aspect of setting up the projection and the trailer, and conceptually Gabe and Maddie as well in writing the piece and doing the research and pointing out the holes and the logic and the argument and trying to fill in those gaps and challenging one another has been a great process.
I've also found it really useful to have teammates who I can sort of call on for meetings to just try to present ideas and even more workshop style type of stuff. Having a group that can sort of be like spitballing all of these ideas and then asking questions. And I mean, it's completely different from just like working in a void. yeah, I found that really fruitful, and also just to have those people be so engaged in the same subject matter, but like Gabe said, like from slightly different angles and with slightly different backgrounds. It adds a lot of value. Yeah, I've really appreciated the fact that it's been 4 of us. And if you think about how grants are often awarded, it's usually on an individual basis, or at least it often is. Grants that I've gotten in the past have been just for the individual. So it's sort of just asking people for their input here and there. They might just do it because you're a friend, but with this, because we've all been involved in the same way, it feels a bit more, yeah, just fair. And
Anyone else wants to jump in?
Sure. Great work, everyone. Nice to see you again. I know Maddie at least said she was discussing with people who are at the front lines, if you will, and that's a bit of always an aspect of these things, right? Because you're taking this, you're making it artistic so that it can engage people in different ways, which they wouldn't think about normally, which is great. But at the same time, there's like a pragmatic angle to this where people are literally trying to find places to live while they're building these gigantic condos. Do you think and you also talk about the community you're sort of building with each other, always a tough thing on Zoom, so it's great when it happens. Do you think there might be some interest in, reaching out to groups like Frappru or that kind of thing, and maybe just exchanging from one community to the other to see what the overlap is and how one could influence the other?
Yeah, we've discussed this a little bit. I feel like we're in exploratory mode. Like, what can we do? What works and what doesn't, and like, yeah, what kind of results can we get with doing this kind of public art intervention around these issues? How do people respond? But I think that is in like the future does hold that, reaching out to groups that are active in housing rights, housing committees, the Frappru, etc.
Yeah, I really see a future for shock value fellowship. I think that like right now we're exploring a specific iteration of the four of us doing the research we presented today. But I think like, at the end of that, it's not really the end. I think that there's definitely an opportunity to see what other people out there in Montreal might be doing similar research or interested in similar things, and maybe even like opening it up to more collaboration and sort of seeing what kind of funding opportunities there might be to kind of fund like future iterations of this shock value fellowship in terms of like what kind of work can come about. I think it could be kind of an open slate, as long as it's focusing in on like why we're all here today, of course, like looking at the housing crisis. So yeah, just finding other stakeholders, if we want to use that businessy word, I think could be a really interesting thing to look at after the summer.
If we're in person too, that'd be fantastic, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And really quick, sorry for taking up time, but I'm sure I know the answer already, but do you see the institution and the grant people as being, working against having this sort of connection with the community around you? Or did you see some examples of them trying to facilitate this?
It's kind of interesting timing to ask that. I don't know if like maybe would Sarah want to speak to this and like talk about the future of Office of Rules and Norms?
That's maybe a bit premature, but
Okay, no
how
problem.
about I bounce back another question, a crazy question. Would the four of you consider living together rent-free?
Yeah.
For sure.
Let's do it.
I'm holding on to a low rent apartment in Centre Sud though, and I never want
So-
it to be gentrified. So I can't leave.
But you'd have to find solutions
Yeah.
to keep it low rent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it's part of a larger of like how you do this collectively, you know? Because are you all like living by yourselves, or what's the situation for the moment?
Well,
You can see in our bios.
I was gonna say.
Our bios went by in the chat.
Since we're moving towards the end of the time we have together, I just wanted to make room for maybe one last question, if there is any.
I wanted to encourage people to fill out Christine's form.
Aw, thanks,
And
Gabe.
it's in the chat. It's the Google Drive link in the chat, a couple chats up. It's a really nice meditative thing to do, sitting at home.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you know, the form, it kind of intentionally has that overwhelming bureaucratic feel to it. But just I really worked hard to try to make it super clear, just one thing at a time, one step at a time. And basically I think I recommend like 10 minutes to just sit somewhere in your space and just listen and record, and then could be about 10 minutes to like do the visualization if you feel inclined. Yeah.
Okay, so well, on that would wrap up this edition of the Office Hours on the Shock Value Fellowship. I strongly encourage you to follow the Office of Rules and Norms on Facebook. I'm usually not a please like, share, and subscribe type of girl. But since you kind of maybe understood that we were doing some deep thinking around the future of Office of Rules and Norms, there might be a lot of new things coming up for us. And if you're interested in, continue this discussion, meeting the fellows during the next interventions with the pavilion and the statement of sounds and emotion, but also, be engaged in the future of Office of Rules and Norms and the work we're doing around the housing crisis. The best I can do right now is say, please like the Facebook page so we can keep in contact together and maybe build a community around this. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Anna and Fort Space, for hosting this conversation today.
Well, thank you, Marie-Sophie, and always a pleasure to hear from all of you. Maybe somebody could put that link to that Facebook. I know what you're saying about the subscribe to my channel vibe, but it's a good way to stay connected these days. But I guess I'll add on to that just to say we're excited to host you all in For Space, hopefully this fall, to continue these office hours live and, in person, sitting round table. So we look forward to that possibility and opportunity, and keeping the relationship and the conversation going. So thanks, folks, for being here with us on this weirdly, I don't know, temperamental evening. I guess it's all over the place, but anyhow, we really appreciate you sharing your work in this way. So on that note, we'll close up the meeting. The recording, of course, will be available on YouTube. We'll pull out a clip and put it on Instagram and lead people back to this session if they missed it. So we look forward to seeing you all again the next time we reconnect. All right. Good night. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
You.